Fire, 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 fire. Bundle up. It's a gray, stormy day outside. Even if it's not and it's sunny outside, you just shut your windows, shut your doors, but shut your blinds and get immersed. I'm ready. I got my banky. Well, I don't actually have my banky, but, you know, virtually speaking, I'm ready.
This is the Ocean Ranger.
What?
When it was launched, it was said to be the largest oil rig in the world, and it was truly
Second
impressive.
to your mom.
It was like a massive floating stadium built to withstand the worst weather conditions of the North Atlantic Ocean. But on February 14th, 1981, something would happen on board that for the crew would turn it into the worst place on Earth to be stranded. This is the horrifying story of the Ocean Ranger, and as always, viewer discretion is advised.
Ooh. I love this guy. He makes such quality videos. Chad, I'm so scared.
By the 1960s, serious exploration had begun off Canada's east coast, with exploratory oil drilling taking place around Newfoundland and Labrador. And after beginning, the focus quickly zeroed in on this underwater plateau off the coast called the Grand Banks.
Ooh.
This area was once one of the richest fishing grounds in the world, and the province depended on the fishing industry it supported. However, unfortunately, overfishing was causing the collapse of several species towards the end of the 20th century, forcing the province to look elsewhere to sustain itself. Luckily, this area also happened to be rich in oil, and there in 1979, geologists struck oil at what would become known as the Hibernia oil field. This discovery was extremely significant and maybe the biggest the country had ever seen. Striking oil, however, isn't the same as pumping it, and finding it is only the beginning. Afterward, the companies involved, which were led by Mobil Oil, need to figure out just how big the reserve was.
Those damn Americans.
They needed data, and to get that data, they needed to drill a series of wells to map out the boundaries and capacity of the oil reserve. This is where the Ocean Ranger came in. This was a massive cutting-edge drilling rig, and it was stationed in the area by the winter of 1982 and began punching a hole in the sea floor.
Right before the Soviet
Data
collapse,
then began flooding back that would begin shaping the province's economic future. At first glance, the Ocean Ranger looks like something out of science fiction. Built in 1976 by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, the platform was a floating colossus. It was 396 feet, or 121 meters long, 262 feet, or 80 meters wide, and 337 feet, or 103 meters high. The rig's full weight also topped 25,000 tons, and Odeco, the company that owned the Ocean Ranger, called it the world's largest semi-submersible oil rig at the time. Interestingly, instead of standing on fixed legs anchored to the ocean floor, the Ocean Ranger floated. Its deck.
That sounds like a bad idea. Oh no! How do you stabilize it and make it not float off? I don't understand.
Where the drilling happened, set high above the water, supported by 8 massive columns that rose from 2 underwater pontoons.
Yeah, how do you keep it stable?
These pontoons had ballast tanks, allowing seawater to be taken in or pumped out to adjust the platform's position. The whole system then worked through a network of valves and pumps controlled from a specialized room deep inside the rig.
Large
and
anchors.
This system is ingenious. By submerging the pontoons below the surface, the rig could avoid the worst of the ocean's movement. And unlike surface ships that rock with every wave, the Ocean Ranger sat mostly still, no matter what the weather was like. And this design also had another benefit. It made the rig mobile. The Ocean Ranger could be towed into position and stabilized using 12 massive anchors, each weighing 45,000 pounds.
That's a lot of pounds.
Once locked into place, it could operate in water depths of up to 1,500 feet or 460 meters and drill down to more than 25,000 feet or 7,600 meters.
To get that dinosaur
On top of that,
oil,
the rig was built to take on monster waves, hurricane-force winds, blinding snowstorms, and whatever else the notorious North Atlantic could throw at it. By the 1980s, since it was put into use in 1976, the Ocean Ranger had worked in 2 oceans and made it through more than 50 storms.
You could not pay me enough money to go out there. I don't know, the ocean is terrifying. Literally shit my pants kind of moment. I remember... This is so fucking stupid. One of the earliest dreams I had when I was a child that I remember was me floating in the ocean and then falling to the ground and then hitting the ocean floor. And the entire dream I had was me floating to the ground, and then there's like sharks and whales and freaky ass freaking monsters swimming by. And then when I hit the floor, I started crying because I was so scared. Like, I don't know. I don't have a fear of the ocean, but it's scary as fuck thinking about it. Like, how many people just died out there?
By late November of 1981, the Ocean Ranger had settled into its assignment at the Hibernia
some
oil
dinosaur
field.
juice down there.
The well it was working on, labeled J34, was its third at the site, and given that it was winter, the Grand Banks were as cold and unforgiving as ever. But for the 84 men living and working aboard the rig, this was just another job. Nearby, two semi-submersible rigs were also operating, one named Sedco 706 and the other Zapata Ugland. Together, the three platforms were creating exploratory wells in their respective sections of the ocean. And although they weren't within shouting distance, they were close enough to be aware of each other's presence and often shared radio traffic and weather reports. The work at J34 continued as normal for months, all the way until February 1982. It was there when on Sunday, February 14th, forecasters sent word that a strong winter storm was brewing that was tied to a major Atlantic hurricane, and it was projected to pass directly over the rigs later that day. The morning report called for winds up to 90 knots and waves in excess of 37 feet or 11 meters.
Holy.
Obviously, these conditions weren't ideal, but they also weren't unheard of either. The Ocean Ranger had handled worse before. By mid-afternoon, the crew began the process of something known as hanging off. This is a standard procedure where the drill pipe is disconnected and retracted to keep it from snapping in heavy seas.
Right, because they drill in.
By around 4:30 p.m. that afternoon, the rig was essentially battened down and ready to ride out the storm.
Well, that's good.
What no one realized at the time, however, was that this wouldn't be just another rough night at sea. Around 7 p.m., the Sedco 706 rig took a direct hit from a rogue wave. And this unusually large surge was strong enough that it damaged parts of its deck and tore away a life raft. And this should have been a red flag, but on the Ocean Ranger just miles away, things still seemed under control. Around 8 p.m. though, another massive wave struck the Ocean Ranger and this time smashed a window or what's called a port light on the ballast control room.
Oh no. Dude, the amount of power that nature has and we still don't know how to harvest it fully, like thunder and the ocean and earthquakes, like they produce so much power and we don't even know how to like harness it for ourselves. We don't have that technology yet. Like, yeah, people try and stuff, but like you just can't do it yet. We don't have that.
Instant that
Nature's
one point
so
of vulnerability
powerful.
located 28 feet or 8.5 meters from the waterline had suddenly turned into a direct entryway for the storm. Seawater then rushed.
The wind? I mean, yeah, you can harvest the wind, obviously, but like, I'm just saying, like, what if we harvested earthquakes? Natural disasters.
Soaking the console that managed the rig's ballast system. With that one chance blow, the Ocean Ranger's most critical internal system was compromised.
It's untapped.
The ballast control room was essentially the brain behind the entire rig's balance. From that room, a single operator on a 12-hour shift could open and close valves, shift ballast water between compartments, and fine-tune the platform's position to keep it stable even in rough seas. It did, however, have one fatal flaw. It wasn't built to get wet. After the wave crashed through the port light and soaked the ballast control console, the crew couldn't be sure what damage had been done, but they acted fast. Power to the control system was then either cut off by the water itself or deliberately shut off to prevent electrical shock. And soon after, a cleanup team entered the room to assess the situation and noticed something strange. Lights on the ballast control panel were flashing between red and green. That meant that the valves were opening and closing by themselves. If those lights were accurate, the ballast tanks on the port side were filling with seawater, which would cause the rig to lean in that direction, something especially dangerous given the weather. The crew then had to act quickly. There was a kill switch that could cut all power to the system and shut the valves automatically, but it wasn't located in the control room itself. They would end up having to call the rig's electrician to find it, and by the time the switch was finally thrown almost an hour later, it was just after 9 p.m. The Ocean Ranger then radioed the other rigs nearby and confirmed that a port light had been broken and the control room had flooded, but almost as if in relief, the message was calm and the crew said the situation had been handled. For the next couple hours, everything seemed stable. The Ocean Ranger continued normal radio communications with its neighbors and with support vessels in the area. Weather reports still mentioned brutal wind and towering waves, some as high as 65 feet or about 20 meters, but there were no signs of panic aboard. From the outside, the rig looked like it had taken the hit and shaken it off. By all appearances, cutting power to the ballast control system had stabilized the situation. And with the valve shut and the storm raging outside, the Ocean Ranger seemed to be riding things out, but at some point close to midnight, the crew made a decision that sealed the rig's fate. For some reason, they turned the power back on. Why exactly they did this is still unclear. They may have wanted to raise the rig slightly to stay higher above the waves, or maybe they were just checking to see if the system was working again after drying out the panel. Whatever the reasoning, restoring power allowed the damaged system to come alive and it no longer behaved predictably. Some of the valves in the forward ballast tanks began opening again, but whether these were triggered by short circuits or operator input, the result was the same. Seawater then rushed into the bow of the rig and slowly the Ocean Ranger began to tip forward. Around this time, nearby rigs and vessels picked up bits of radio chatter from the Ocean Ranger, including reports of the rig listing and repeated attempts to shut the ballast system back down. But the damage was already done. Each time the crew tried to cut power and stop the water flow, the few seconds it took for the valves to close allowed even more water to pour into the ballast tanks. Now, normally, the way to fix a forward list would be to pump the water back out using the pumps at the rear of the rig.
There's probably too much water.
The angle of the rig made that impossible.
Dude, imagine the sound it makes when it's like creaking forward, man.
The pumps simply didn't have enough power to push the water that far uphill. There was another solution, which was transferring water from the bow to the middle tanks, but no one on board seems to have known how to do this. So in desperation, someone in the control room came up with a backup plan. There was a set of brass rods designed to manually operate the valves if the system failed. The crew then shut the power off again and began threading the rods into the panel, but they immediately discovered a problem. The rods could only open the valves, not close them, and without power, the control room's indicators were dead, so the crew had no way of knowing which valves were open, which were closed, or where the water was going.
Thing.
This meant they were working blind, and with every move, the situation was getting worse. As more valves opened, more water flooded the forward tanks. The rig's listing then grew steeper, and soon it crossed a line it couldn't come back from. All the while, the churning sea below was just 5 degrees Celsius or 41 Fahrenheit. Any splashing inside would have been brutally cold. And as the bow dipped lower, the top of the rig's corner columns, which normally sit safely at more than 80 feet or 24 meters above the sea, were suddenly within reach of the storm surges. This is where another design flaw came into play. At the top of each of these corner columns were wide, uncovered openings, which were access points for the massive chains and cables that helped to anchor the rig.
Flooding it.
These storage areas weren't protected by hatches or lids, and under normal conditions, this wasn't.
You wouldn't be able to like predict that kind of thing. I mean, you can have safety mechanisms, but you just wouldn't have thought of it at the time.
Problem, but the Ocean Ranger was no longer sitting level.
Man.
So one by one, the waves began crashing into those open chain
then they just flood in
them
there.
With seawater. And because there were no alarms or sensors in place to warn the crew, they had no idea this was happening. As far as they knew, the rig was still reacting to whatever was happening inside the ballast tanks. So the ballast control team, unaware of the flooding in the lockers, continued trying to fix the problem by threading more
Chernobyl-level design flaws? I've studied Chernobyl pretty intensely. It was both flaws and also human error. This is more so like, how would they have predicted it without the sensors installed, and with how bad the storm was, and with how it was tipping to one side? I don't know. This was before Chernobyl. Yeah, I think it was in 86 too. I mean, they're two different things, but I think there was a lot more human error and carelessness involving Chernobyl.
Brass rods into the console.
Yeah.
And with no functional indicators,
it was
they
a
were
perfect
unintentionally
storm.
opening more
Mods
valves
ban
and
that
allowing
guy.
more water to pour in.
Just immediately
Finally,
ban him.
the situation became undeniable. At around 1 a.m., the Ocean Ranger began transmitting Mayday signals. The crew knew they were in serious trouble. The Seaforth Highlander, which was the rig's standby vessel, then got a call and headed in as fast as it could, but the weather was just relentless, with winds in excess of 115 miles per hour, waves taller than buildings, and visibility close to zero. Just getting near the rig would take more than an hour, and even that was optimistic. And
with a storm like that, I don't know.
Later,
you're lucky you're not sending people to their death too.
The Ocean Ranger sent a final radio transmission stating that the crew was heading to the lifeboat stations to abandon the rig. By the time the Ocean Ranger's final message crackled over the radio, the situation had already passed the point of recovery.
Oh, jeez.
The rig was listing badly, somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees, and the sea was hammering it from every direction. The crew then began to lower the lifeboats, but even that was a gamble. They were dealing with what was essentially a skyscraper in the middle of the ocean and in hurricane-force winds.
And you're crashing into the water and hoping that you survive. I mean, it's better than dying on the rig for certainty. I mean, for certain. Yeah.
Those lifeboats had to swing down from those great heights. As you might imagine, some never made it. Violent gusts slammed them against the side of the rig, crushing the lifeboats' hulls before they even reached the water.
You're taking your chances.
Others were even flipped or torn away before they could even be boarded.
Yep.
And it's likely, although not entirely certain,
that's so
many
scary,
of the men
man.
jumped.
And you can't see anything, and you're in the dark, because, like, there's no power, there's no, like, floodlights, probably. You're literally in the dark, and there's no natural light except what nature offers you. And what if it's, like, a pitch black, like, cloudy, overcast day? It's like, there's nothing. There's no refraction, there's no reflection. Like, what do you do?
Or were thrown into the frozen Atlantic. In water that cold, even strong summers could only last minutes before hypothermia took over.
You just have like a little bit of light from
massive
yourself.
Violent swells they were in.
Yeah, from flashlights probably.
The Seaforth Highlander arrived at the site just after 2 a.m. and fired an emergency flare to let out the chaos. But what they saw was grim. The Ocean Ranger was still afloat, but badly listing, and waves were continuously washing over the deck.
Guess I'll
There were also no sign of people on board, and the lifeboats appeared to all be gone.
Oh no.
Debris was also scattered across the water, but they managed to spot one battered lifeboat with survivors actually alive inside.
No shot.
The Highlander then managed to get close and threw a line to secure it, and for a brief moment it looked like at least a few men would make it out alive. But just then, a massive swell rose and rolled the lifeboat over, tossing everyone into the sea.
No.
The crew of the Highlander tried desperately to pull them out, but the waves kept beating them back. One of the ship's officers even got within feet of a man in the water before another wave slammed in and snapped the line. The lifeboat, by then, upside down, drifted off into the night, and it was never seen again. Nearby support vessels also arrived shortly after, but the conditions were brutal. Visibility was poor, the sea was still raging, and the Ocean Ranger was rapidly disappearing. By 2:45 a.m., the rig was just barely above the water, and by 3:10, it had vanished from the radar completely.
Oh my god, it took an hour for Mother Nature to wreck that thing.
Of 84 men, including 46 mobile employees and 38 contractors, were dead.
7.
Search and rescue efforts continued throughout the night and into the following days, but they were met with mostly silence. 2 more lifeboats were found empty, several life rafts were also located but were badly damaged and without survivors.
Yep.
And in total, only 22 bodies were ever recovered. Autopsy.
Out of 80 people too, that Mother Nature just swallowed them whole.
Later confirmed that the men had drowned, mostly in a hyperthermic state.
Yeah.
In the days and weeks after the Ocean Ranger disappeared beneath the North Atlantic, investigators were left with a complicated puzzle of trying to figure out how the most advanced semi-submersible rig of its time ended up at the bottom of the ocean.
A mistake?
The answer, as it turned out, wasn't one single failure. The ending began with a broken porthole, and things only got messier from there. The control panel, soaked with ocean water, malfunctioned, creating chaos among a crew that was desperately trying to get a handle on what exactly was happening with the rig's ballast system. And making matters worse, the crew apparently didn't really know how to fix it. The ballast control operators had no formal training, just a few weeks of shadowing more experienced operators. In place of classroom instruction and certification, they were given on-the-job training under normal conditions. They weren't put through a single simulated emergency. In fact, one of the operators had only been on the job for 12 weeks before being assigned to manage the rig's stability. There were also no written emergency procedures for a ballast system failure. The team went for the brass rods, but they didn't know how they worked, and their blind adjustments only made things worse. And the flooding chain lockers, like the porthole, were another design flaw that led to the disaster. By the time the Mayday call was sent out, the list was too steep to overcome, and the water was too high. The rig's pumps couldn't move water back to where it needed to go, rescue crews couldn't get close enough in time, and lifeboats and rafts weren't equipped to handle conditions that extreme. Official reports from both the US Coast Guard and the Canadian Royal Commission listed multiple causes for the disaster, including poor crew training, a lack of clear safety procedures, serious flaws in the rig's design, and inadequate regulation and oversight from government agencies. In short, it seemed the Ocean Ranger was a disaster waiting to happen. In 1983, the Ocean Ranger was raised by a Dutch salvage company and resunk in deeper waters to eliminate the navigational hazard it posed to shipping lanes in the North Atlantic. However, even that operation turned into a tragedy. 3 divers were killed in 2 separate accidents during the recovery efforts. In the end, the findings of the commission led to sweeping changes in offshore regulations. Crew training standards were overhauled, survival suits became mandatory,
so many accidents and disasters led to like safety protocol reinforcements. So many people died for it, man.
Boat designs were revisited, safety drills were required, and no longer would critical control systems rely on a single point of failure. To this day, the disaster remains the deadliest offshore drilling accident in Canadian history.
Thank you for your service.
If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching.
Your sacrifice.
If you have a story suggestion, feel free to submit it to the forum found in the description. Also, if you want to support the channel, consider joining the Patreon or becoming a channel member here on YouTube.
Rights, rules,
Anyways,
and blood.
thanks again, and
I mean,
hopefully
how do
I will see you in the next one.
Yeah, a lot of people sacrifice, like, in an inadvertent, like, martyred themselves, I suppose. Like, that's how it works, you know? I made the rules, and you figure it out what has holes. Lots of that in aviation. And imagine how many people built, like, you know, any amount of machinery and how many times it's, like, killed someone, and they're like, oh, oops, there's a screw loose. I guess I'll tighten that next time. Nope. Every single thing. Cars, like, appliances, electricity in general, like, anything, you know? How many people died for you to have a computer?